Hello, everyone, and welcome to Away Games, a Chicago Cubs and baseball podcast hosted by two comedians who live in New York but love the Cubs anyway. Some of the time, I am currently in New York, but not in my home, which is why it may sound a little echoey. And
it sounds like you're in
for that.
It sounds like you're in Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. You're
oh, jeez, this is not ideal. Sorry, everyone.
No, that is okay. This is this is how it's going. Hey, he's Adam Mamwala. I'm Kevin McCaffrey, and this is Away Games podcast. This is like it's during winter meetings, and this is when you're hearing the mainstream media talking too. They're having to tuck away to corners of hotels and stuff like this. So this is just an on the fly vibe,
It is true. And Kevin, before we started recording, I believe you described your location as a haunted Victorian dollhouse.
That's what it looks like. There's these drapes that have been here since President Buchanan at least. And literally the last time I was sitting at this table, it was maybe a year ago when I was doing this Tulsa Comedy Club. I'm at Looney Bin in Tulsa, Oklahoma. If you're around there, so I'm there all week. The blinds here literally just haunted, just fell on my head while I was eating Mexican food. I did nothing. They just fell on me. I don't want to say this, but I think the blinds might be both haunted and racist. I think perhaps they didn't like your choice of food is what happened. Yeah, no, just slapping it out of my hand. We only eat cheeseburger. So, Adam, this is the first time in a while we've had a kind of a lot going on to talk about here, Cubs-wise.
We certainly have. I guess, do we want to start with the sad or the not quite as sad? Well, as we record this on Thursday, yesterday, one of our favorite, maybe your favorite Cub in the past, 5 years, other than maybe Rizzo, Willson Contreras has signed a 5-year deal with the rival St. Louis Cardinals. And tell you what, is it Jed's league? Is that what's happening here?
This is Jed's league, everybody. I've started seeing "Let Jed Cook" in tweets, and I've only recently stopped throwing up from seeing that. But look, you can make arguments for why you should move on to a different catcher, and it seems like now we've moved on to a level of copium and Cubs Twitter where people are posting the ERA splits of people with Willson versus with Yan Gomes, which I'm not saying that's not like a stat to consider. By the way, Stroman's was a little bit better with Willson, and part of this is because the pitching staff got better as the year went on, and that's when Willson happened to miss time with injury. So there's reasons for why this is. But look, there's reasons why you would move on from Willson Contreras to a different kind of catcher. Okay, maybe, fine. What I think is frustration for me, maybe for the Cubs fans who are frustrated by this, besides the obvious, the worst case scenario of him going to the Cardinals for 5 years at $17.5 million per. For comparison, that's what we just paid Cody Bellinger for this year too, basically. So it's just the fact that the Cubs could not find a way to build around anyone who was here. And not one, no one ever thought, I think you're going to keep those, the core world champion Cubs forever. But to not extend a single one, besides Hendricks for a couple of years, is just a level. It feels like a level of like failure and just not having an idea, not having a confident idea about how to move forward. And I think watching Willson leave is just like, it's just kind of the final straw in a sense for me. Like, well, I guess we fully did nothing,
Yeah, and it's not to say that there weren't a bunch of guys who were organizational guys who came up with the team and then were let go or traded. But Willson especially, my God, the Cubs signed him when he was 15 years old, 16 years old?
16, I think,
developed him. He turned into a catcher in the system, came up in 2016, flair for the dramatic, immediately hits a home run in his the first pitch he sees in the big leagues, catches Game 7 of the World Series, wins a World Series with the Cubs, and has continued to be one of the most passionate players that we've ever seen, and someone who I think, unless everyone's been pulling the wool over our eyes, is a great teammate. Who else do you want? And I think, to your point, I never expected that the core would stay together forever because things change, and part of that core didn't pan out. We had the Addison Russells of the world. We had even Javi having up and down years. And there's a case to be made for not having all of them continue, especially if it wasn't working. But to not have someone like a Rizzo bridge that gap, or a Contreras, who are leaders who could kind of, if they were willing to stick around, which it seems like they were, be part of that rebuilding process, to be like, okay, I was with the team that won it all, and now I'll be here as a veteran presence on a team that we're trying to get back there. I just don't understand why you wouldn't want that. And now we sit here recording this with the only 2016 Cub being Kyle Hendricks, unless you count David Ross, which I don't.
No, yeah, exactly. It's different, and I think everything you said was exactly right, and the fact that he was both Rizzo and Contreras, especially, I think, were the ones that, I mean, were just very public about wanting to stay a Cub. Honestly, Chris Bryant and Javi Baez were very public about it too, but I think, you know, Rizzo said he wanted to go down with the ship. He didn't want to get traded even. He wanted to keep working on an extension. Obviously, that didn't happen, and Contreras never wanted to leave. And I think what we also have to acknowledge here is that obviously there's been news that Contreras, there was a deal with the Astros for Urquidy that was struck down by a combination of the Astros owner and Dusty Baker at the last minute, and people have been being like, well, that really screwed Jed. Jed had a year and a half where he knew he wasn't going to extend this guy. If he only came up with one deal in that time, and you see that Willson Contreras there is value for him. I mean, 87.5 for 5 years, that tells you what the Cardinals, who I know we don't like Yachty, but I mean, it seems like they value catching over there, and you know, to some degree, right? So if they valued him there, we knew the Astros offer was close to that. This is an absolute failure to not deal Contreras if you were never going to extend him anyway, and now you end up getting some draft pick between 75th and 80 in a draft for. And I saw, forgive me, I forget who tweeted this, but I think it was Greg Huss maybe tweeted that the last time the Cubs were picking in that range, they got Cole Roederer and Paul Richan. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but he was in the Castellanos trade. So, I mean, that's what we're looking at for this. So it's a failure. If the choice of not extending him, whatever, you can get, different people have different opinions. Getting only the pick that you get for someone signing a guy you gave a qualifying offer to, that is a failure of this move as that GM. There, you cannot convince me that a better front office would not have done better with Willson Contreras there. So it's a bummer, and he was such a fun guy to have here.
Yeah, and there have been people on Cubs Twitter who are saying like, oh well, Willson did this intentionally to stick it to the Cubs. He wanted to go to the Cardinals to say screw you to the Cubs. And honestly, if he did, so be it. Like he first of all, I think that's kind of a bullshit critique, and
it's insane.
I think it's a terrible take.
Yeah.
But even if that were the case, okay, I mean, this is a guy who laid it all out there for the team for years, very publicly said that he wanted to stay there, that he loved the fans, that he loved playing in Chicago, and at every turn was told that he wasn't valued. So if I wanted to stick it to someone, I would probably go to the Cardinals. And you know how you avoid someone going to the Cardinals? You fucking trade them to a team that's not the Cardinals. Because the Cubs, as bad as Jed Hoyer has been at his job, I don't think that there's a world in which he trades Willson Contreras to the Cardinals last year.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think so either. And there's no way Willson specifically was like, I must go where I fuck the Cubs the most. That is not the case. There's 87.5 million reasons why he just went where he went. That's the best deal he was offered, it seems. So he took the best deal. He does not owe the organization that did not value him anything. He clearly values the fans of Chicago. He's been very classy and upfront with about how he was treated in Chicago, and that's great. But I saw that too, and it's just like, that is such meatball sports radio call-in talk where it's like, well, he's doing this to hurt us. Fuck him. Fuck that. No, he is. He was a great Cub, and he was a great Cub, and I'll miss him. And I think he's going to be a pretty good Cardinal.
And to your point also about like, it seems fairly clear that there was never a plan to extend him. So yes, as much as it would have crushed us even more in 2021, why not also trade Willson when he had a year and a half left? And in the same way, if the Cubs don't extend Ian Happ and then he walks after this season, it will have been equally inept for Hoyer to not trade him at his highest value this trade deadline. Like if that is the plan, then either do it or don't do it. And I think we all know that being a baseball GM is a lot of like cat and mouse games and trying to play chess with people and see what you can get from them. But I completely agree. Whether the Urquidy deal fell through or not, You can't be coming down to the wire at the trade deadline as a GM in that position and not have another plan there.
You have one plan? That's not
right.
enough. That's not an excuse. In the same way that prospects getting injured is not an excuse when people say now, like, oh, Brennan Davis and Canario getting hurt, that really fucks Jed. But going with trading people for a bunch of prospects and moving forward in that way with your organization is a choice, and that's fine. That is a choice. But part of that, the risk of injury is baked into that. That's not bad luck. This is part of the choice. So, yeah, it's too bad. There is more exciting news for the Cubs that we'll get to now, but I think it's worthwhile to as we see, we knew this was coming pretty much, that Contreras wasn't coming back to the Cubs, but now that it's official, he's a fantastic Cub, one that you and I both wish was still here, and for me, it really takes a lot of the soul out of how I feel about this team right now, which people can hear from hearing me on this podcast frequently enough, but I guess there is some news about new Cubs. Who would you like to start with there?
Well, you mentioned Bellinger before, so I guess let's talk about the Bellinger deal. 1 year, $17.5 million, which feels high, but I guess that's what someone was going to give him. And as far as like a reclamation project is concerned, my guess is that the idea is he'll come there, hopefully have a year in which he's trying to prove himself and prove the doubters wrong so that he can go get a big contract elsewhere. And either way, regardless of how it works out, you theoretically have Pete Crow-Armstrong developing in the system to be ready, if not in the following season, like sometime during that year. So I can understand not going out and signing a center fielder for a 6-year deal for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the only center fielder out there that you would give a 6-year deal to is Brandon Nimmo, who I don't want for a number of personal reasons, but also just like, I think it just doesn't make sense to spend the money there. Brandon Nimmo is a very good player, but as you said, with the Cubs prospects that they do have coming up, it's in the outfield particularly. So that's, I think, a 1-year deal, which technically is like, I think it's a $12 million deal with a $5.5 million buyout. So functionally, it's a $17.5 million deal for Bellinger. And he's going to be here for the 1 year. Offers cover at center field and first base. He's plus defense in center field, plus defense at first base if you need it. So the plan is to mainly play him in center. And then Pete Crow-Armstrong or Brennan Davis or Canario, whoever is going to be coming up, end of the year or going into next. So I'll tell you what Bellinger did last year. 19 homers and 14 steals are not bad numbers. A nice little power speed combo. 83 WRC plus, which means he's 17% worse than league average, basically. But the year before that, he was way worse than that. In 2021, he had a WRC plus of 47, which is like, I mean, he wishes he was Jason Hayward at his worst, who, by the way, just signed with the Dodgers. Jason Hayward is over there. So that saves the Cubs the price of the minimum salary. Since Hayward is still on contract with the Cubs, the Dodgers have to pay him the minimum salary, so the Cubs will save several $100,000. So that should push the Correa offer right over the top on that. But
I guess that begs the question, can you give a dramatic rain delay speech in a city where there is no rain?
It's tough. I mean, yeah, what would the equivalent be? Just like a dramatic
drought speech?
Yeah,
smog.
Yeah, drought speech. It's the opposite. Bellinger, when he was at his best, he won MVP. He had his first 3 years, he was an absolute stud. He was a superstar, and he had in his best year had a walk rate of 14%, strikeout rate of 16%. That's really good. Last year, he had a walk rate of 7% and a strikeout rate of 27%, which is bad. So,
what do we think happened to him? Was it one of those, like, the league figured him out at some point? Did he just get in his own head?
Well, he had a shoulder problem. So he had an injury to his shoulder, and that sort of, started.
Didn't he hurt himself celebrating in the World Series?
I think that did happen, right?
He did like the Bash Brothers thing and separated his shoulder.
I think so, right? I think I'm not making that up, right?
That might have been something that like exacerbated an existing injury, but either way.
Yeah, exactly. So I think now he's had longer time to recover, and like we said, he was better last year than he was the year before. The power is still there. To me, this is like it depends on what else you do, but on its own, this is a fine move. This is it covers defensively in center where the Cubs were the worst team in baseball last year, and so that gets a lot better. And it adds a left-handed bat because this lineup is fully right-handed otherwise, basically, and it gives you a little bit of balance there, some backup at first base. It's a good 1 year gamble, and if he bursts back anywhere close to what his potential is, then it's like, oh yeah, that's that's a big help, but you can't count on it. Like, he hasn't even been league average in over 2 years. So, a fine sort of 1 year thing to me. But the 17.5 billion made me feel like, okay, well, they have to get one of the biggest shortstops. And Adam, there's only two of the biggest shortstops left now.
Right. Yeah. So the big news in the past week is that Trey Turner signed was it 10 years, 300 million?
I think it was 11, right? With Philadelphia.
I'll have to look at it. I know Bogarts, was 11 for 280. So the big news of yesterday, and it seemed for a while like Bogarts to the Cubs felt realistic. There was even a moment where they were saying, "Oh, the Cubs might get Swanson and Bogarts," but Bogarts has signed a 11-year, $280 million deal with the Padres, who are just collecting shortstops at this point. They now have Bogarts, Tatis, and Machado. I think they're going to move Tatis to the outfield, I believe, is the plan. If he doesn't keep using needles in his butt, but
crashing motorcycles and stuff.
Yeah, it just seems like an ass. But basically, the Cubs now find themselves in a position where the market has been set. They have not jumped the market, and as a result, they are going to have to overpay for someone if they want them. And I think this also goes back to what we said about Hoyer before, perhaps waiting too long at the trade deadline. If you wait too long in free agency, the same thing happens as well, because if Bogarts is getting 11 and 280, I don't know what the hell Correa is getting, but it's going to be more than that.
Well, and Correa wanted the 10-year, $300 million last year, and if the Cubs had done that then, you would do 9 for 270 for Correa right now, wouldn't you? And obviously, so I think that like we said, that is part of the job of running a team, of ownership of the front office, is reading where the market is going, and the market goes up. And I think the frustrating thing for Cubs fans, and again, I don't know, the Cubs could sign Correa and Swanson, and then we'd be like, wow, that was a very big offseason. But I don't think anyone's feeling like that's likely necessarily at the time. But the offer now for Correa would have to be a lot more than what it was before, but we're watching smaller markets come up with the big money. We're watching San Diego, who all the shortstops you mentioned, also they have Juan Soto over there for the moment. They've got, it's not like it's even just all their shortstops. They got a lot of money in that pitching staff. Remember, Yu Darvish is still on his Cubs contract over there, and we see San Diego putting up money like that. Philadelphia obviously is throwing a ton of cash out there. The Mets just picked up Verlander. The Rangers picked up DeGrom with a big deal, and obviously the Rangers did Semien and Seager last year. So I think when you're looking at like Texas, Philadelphia, and San Diego, they're not tiny markets, but they're smaller teams than the Cubs. They just are, and they're finding the money. So the Cubs have to find the money, because as we sit here right now, adding Bellinger, dropping Contreras, the offense is worse than it was last year. And it sucked last year. Even if you add Swanson to this, Swanson is not a great offensive player. He's good. And he was good defensively. He strikes out a lot, but he has pop. He hit I think he's had exceeded 25 homers in each of the last 2 years. He steals some bases. Very good defense up the middle. But I think, him being included in the 4 shortstop tier here is like, I think people are overrating what you get offensively from Dansby Swanson. So I think if you're looking at this offseason, you really have to go in hard for Correa at this point, because otherwise the offense it doesn't exist on this team.
Right. I think so. The other big thing that we have not mentioned yet is that the Cubs signed Jameson Taillon, who most of us remember from his days on the Pirates. He was then on the Yankees the past couple of years, or maybe it was just 1 year. But either way, he had a very good year with the Yankees. Very, very consistent pitcher. Good strikeout guy. Cubs signed him for I think 4 and 68, which to me I think is a good deal for someone like that, who should theoretically be in his prime.
Yeah, he's Taillon. For people who don't know, he was sort of. I'm trying to think of he's not exactly the Sam Bowie. He's better than that. But from the famous NBA draft year where Olajuwon went 1, Sam Bowie went 2, and Michael Jordan went 3. So Taillon went behind Bryce Harper and in front of Manny Machado. So he was sandwiched in there in that draft, and I believe it was 2010. So he came up with a huge pedigree. He had a great year or two in Pittsburgh, a real top of the rotation kind of guy in Pittsburgh for a couple of years. Then he had surgery for testicular cancer. And then a couple years after that, he had Tommy John. So he's still coming back from Tommy John. He's 31 years old. He's a big boy. He's 6'5", 230. I think what you're looking at is a guy who He threw 170 innings last year, which would have led the Cubs by a lot. This is sort of a guy you lock in, probably number 3 in the rotation, and you just forget about it. You know, his ERA, if you look at it right now, you're not going to be blown away by an ERA around 4 for the last 2 years. But I beg you to consider how dog shit the NL Central is compared to the American League East. The Orioles they were over 500 last year. The last place team was the Red Sox, who were 4 games better than the Cubs. So Jameson Taillon with a 3.9 ERA last year in the AL East. What's that? A 3.6, 3.5 over here in the NL Central, where we had 200 lost teams. So it's a good sign.
In the same way that people are like, if you play in a pitcher's ballpark, it's like, oh well, if he played in a hitter's ballpark, it would have been 55 home runs rather than 42. Like it's the same way with Taillon. Like if he were to pitch theoretically in a worse place, which is where he's been in the NL Central, except unfortunately for him, he was there when the NL Central was very good. I'm pleased with that signing for sure. But in my opinion, the only way, like there's nothing that the Cubs do potentially ever will make me feel okay about how the Willson Contreras situation was handled. But in my honest opinion, the only way that the Cubs can even say that they're really trying to win the division next year involves signing another starting pitcher, whether that be Rodon or Senga or perhaps someone not as expensive, but one of those guys, signing Correa or Swanson, preferably Correa, and trading for like a Sean Murphy.
Yeah, you need to fill the catcher spot by trade or, you know, people have talked about Christian Vasquez from, you know, who's played mostly with the Red Sox and then went over to Houston last year, who doesn't give you a ton offensively. Maybe you hope for him to approach league average offensively, but supposedly is a good catcher in all the invisible ways that we're told Willson is not good, you know, like, and Sean Murphy is good. Sean Murphy's had a couple good years, but I think like, I feel like watching how excited about Sean Murphy people are. He's very good defensively, like extremely strong arm. He is good with framing. I think people are overrating his offense. He had a good offensive year last year, but he's not a world beater offensively. So I would love Sean Murphy. I don't know how much that would cost you in prospects, but it's about time. You're either swinging a big prospect deal for Sean Murphy, or that's how you get your top of the rotation guy. You know, which is why I wanted to sign Contreras, because that would be offense that you're just only paying money for, you know, and then that would have made more sense pairing with a Dansby Swanson, and the offense would be better. But now the offense is getting pretty hard to find if you don't go all in for Correa.
Before they had signed elsewhere, who was your shortstop of preference of those 4?
I probably would. I went Turner 1. Trey Turner was the one that I would have preferred, and then I think like probably Xander 2, because of what you could do in terms of Xander and someone else for the money combining. And then I think Correa is better than Xander Bogaerts overall, but I thought like, but I mean, like,
although I guess in retrospect, Xander and someone else might not have been possible given what he got. Yeah,
and it's weird how. So I think this started with Bryce Harper, where it was the 13-year deal, where it was sort of like the years were more shocking than the money, because Bryce is making, I think it's under 30 a year, like, right? It's so on a per year basis, it's weirdly affordable. And I think it's weird how that sort of seems to be the trend that these mega contracts are going, is longer years and slightly lower average annual value. So, I mean, Xander's very affordable in terms of per year, but he's also signed through 41 at this point. And I guess at that point, you're just like, all right, the last 2 years are sort of like the tax, you know, the last several, it might be more than 2 in his case, but
well, I think that seems to kind of be how contracts are structured now, and that's been the case for a little while now, going back as far as like, you know, the CC Sabathia deal looked like a good deal for the Yankees because they won a championship immediately. Like, yes, at the end of it, it probably wasn't looking that great, but in the same way with Arson Judge now recently.
Yes. Yeah, Arson Judge. John Heyman having the best week ever.
Amazing how quickly one can ruin the little credibility they had left.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, John Heyman is a reporter who just like carries water for any agent or owner who is going to talk to him, and uncritically blasts out a lot of information. But it was very funny for him to be like judge to the Giants and then have to be like first arson judge to the Giants is what he tweeted. And phones are hard, I get it, but maybe you're focusing too much on getting the news out first instead of right. If you can't spell all the words correct, take 1 minute, to just look at it and think about it. So he typed.
It's kind of ironic considering the firestorm he created.
Yes, arson judge lit it up. Yeah, he did start a fire. And then obviously Aaron Judge did not go to the Giants. He went back to New York for 9 years, 360. So 9 years of $40 million per.
Talk about betting on yourself. I think it would be amazing for someone to customize. I mean, I know the Yankees notoriously don't have names on their jerseys, but to just, instead of Judge, just have Arson 99. I think that would be a fun customizable jersey.
Oh, for Players Weekend. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like, now at this point, Taillon and Bellinger have been the big signings. Contreras gone for real. That sort of catches you up to where we are this minute in terms of Cubs signings. The Rule 5 draft just happened. Don't have to worry too much about that. A prospect named Chris Clark was taken by the Mariners. He's a big pitcher who was a mid-round draft pick for the Cubs a few years ago, but we shouldn't be sweating that too much, I think. And yeah, now as we sit here, Adam, what do you want to happen? What do you see happening?
What I want to happen is what I just laid out in terms of, like, I think you absolutely have to get either Correa or Swanson. I really don't want to root for Correa, like, besides having been on the 2017 Astros team, he just like seems like kind of a prick. So I think he's a better player than Swanson, but I also think that Swanson is very good. Like, I think we have to consider the company that he's in when we talk about, like, I don't know if he would be, like, he very much would improve any team that he joins. Yeah. I'm confident in saying that. So I think you have to get one of those two, but I don't know what their price is going to be at this point. In terms of a catcher, it's hard to say that anyone excites me, but then again, I'm biased because I love Willson Contreras.
Yeah, same.
And then pitcher-wise, it just seems unlikely that the Cubs are going to be the team to get Rodon or Senga. So I guess maybe like a Chris Bassett or something like that. Like,
yeah, and all these guys are going to cost money, and that's why, like, I like Taillon. And as I said, what you do is that takes a spot in your rotation. You do not worry about it. He's going to be good most of the time, plugged right in there as of now behind Stroman and Steele, I think, and that's good. But if the money's limited, you want that number one, which is right. You want the guy who can go 2, or if he has to, 3 times in a 7-game playoff series, right? Like, and the Cubs just don't have that guy right now. And I think Rodon is probably the one guy you feel most comfortable about being that guy if he's healthy. But otherwise, it's a trade. I will say this is not necessarily breaking news, but Adbert Alzolay just tweeted a GIF of Stephen A. Smith shaking his head, like, sadly. So this is pretty cryptic. I don't know I wonder, is that trade stuff? It was just 5 minutes ago. So have
you seen any Cubs trades come through?
I have not, but Adbert might be a guy that you would think would possibly be included in a bigger deal. A guy who, at the very least, looks like a very promising multi-inning reliever.
Yeah, I've seen Morel's name thrown around a lot. I've seen Alzolay's name. I wonder, like, what it would take to get Murphy. I feel like, didn't someone talk about that it would be a similar haul to what was the Matt Olson? Matt Olson deal? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it would. When we think about deals like this, you have to remember that a good deal will hurt. So, I mean, I think if you're talking about a Murphy deal, they're probably going to ask. Alzolay makes sense for someone they would ask for, because also we've heard that the A's want major leaguers more than they do minor leaguers. But also, I mean, people are going to be asking for Justin Steele too, and I mean that is a number 2 pitcher who's you're not having to pay that much and is under contract for a while, and I do not want to give up that, because that is difficult to find. But yeah, as the Cubs sign pitchers, that's another thought. Like, some pitchers might be on the move here.
And is Murphy still on his rookie contract?
He is, yeah. So I think Murphy would be under control for 3 more years. There's also been talk about Danny Jansen in Toronto, which would cost less, but I would also be quite less excited about. I don't know if that's quite enough. I feel like he maybe had like a real outlier sort of year with good home run luck. He had a good year, but
well, we were told that the Ricketts told Jed Hoyer that they were opening up the checkbooks. But the thing about it is, when you really break down that statement, that doesn't imply that they're going to use a pen once they open it. They're just going to open it, try to remember their routing number, and then they're going to close it again.
And that sucks. It's like, wait, is it the routing? Is this the one for wires, or is this a different? Is this a different one? Yeah, it reminds me of the Seinfeld bit where he's talking about reserving a rental car, where he's like, anyone can take the reservation. It's really the holding the reservation that's the thing. Where it's like, yeah, it's not the opening of the checkbook, it's the writing the check that's the thing. And they've written 2 checks, great, and they might write. I really do think one more big one is coming. I
hope so.
I think it's. If I was betting money, I would think it's going to be Dansby Swanson, and it's not going to be enough. And that Dansby would be a good player to have, but if that's all the offense coming in, that is not enough to make this team better. And the main point about that, the Ricketts leaking the news that, we're opening up the checkbook, you should be fucking embarrassed that you are the owners of the Cubs, and it is news that you might write a check. And it is news. So even if you're a Ricketts apologist, it is embarrassing to have to announce that as a top 5 market team, you're considering spending money now. Default. That should be the default at all times. It should never need announcing. The Yankees are never like, we're thinking about spending, because they're the fucking Yankees. Same goes for the Mets and the Dodgers, and that's where the bar should be for this team. And I feel like the last couple of years we've done Stockholm syndromed into dropping the bar through the basement here in terms of what we're expecting. So I don't know.
Right. And we also keep getting this mixed messaging about like, we'll spend when it's appropriate to spend. We want to spend in the right way. And and right now, and I don't think the Cubs are done. I don't think they can be done at this moment. But as we sit here now, how is this offseason any different than last offseason when you signed Stroman and Suzuki and you're like, okay, we've done enough to make it seem like we're kind of trying and we're going to act like we have a team that we're fielding that could compete. And then we're going to blame it on injuries and whatever else goes wrong and then trade people. Like, I do think the Cubs will sign more players, so it's not fair to evaluate them as of this moment in early December.
If it stopped now, it would be worse than last year because the two big signings this year are not as good as the 2 last year. So
what I would love to see this offseason realistically is another starting pitcher signed. I don't think it'll be Rodon. I don't think it'll be Senga, but I think like a Bassett type, someone who can also be like a 2-3 in your rotation. Because look, you want an ace, but you can also make a pretty good rotation out of a bunch of 2s. Like if the Cubs rotation were some version of like Stroman, Steele, Taillon, Bassett, and then even Hendricks, that's like a 5 with Nesky in there. I think you can say that that's a pretty strong rotation. So I think you need another starting pitcher. You need at the very least Swanson. You need one of the 2. I also tend to think it'll be Swanson. But I also think it would be really nice and just from like an emotional standpoint, a really good step in the right direction to sign Ian Happ to an extension this offseason. Yeah. Like show that it is possible to re-sign someone to an extension.
I think that's a great call. And there's been talk that Nico and Happ would be 2 people they're targeting for that. I think that's a good call, and that would count as off-season business. Is locking up. It's something they should have done in any one of the previous off seasons with any number of Rizzo, Contreras, whatever. Take your pick, but to lock down spots when you have exclusive negotiating windows with good players that are wanted by other good, smart teams. So and
I've seen we were a lot of people were clowning on a particular Yankees Twitter account who was like, no one suffered more than Yankees fans in the past 30, which is very Trumpian, like no one's treated worse than us.
Yes.
But I've seen people being like, well, yeah, they had Rizzo and Judge last year and they still got their asses kicked by the Astros. So effectively the Yankees have done nothing this offseason. But I could not agree with that less. It was not a given that either of those guys would return to the team. So yes, they do need to do more. They can't just run the same team out there and expect different results. But it was not a given that Aaron Judge would re-sign. It was not a given that Anthony Rizzo would. So that is a big deal.
Yeah, because they weren't going to be on the team, and now they are. So next year's team is better than it was in that window where they weren't there. So yeah, exactly. That's part of the business. But yeah, I think we, same page. They got to get. We say one of the 2 big remaining shortstops, but really, you just got to get some offense in here some way. The catcher spot needs addressed, and definitely one more significant starting pitcher.
Yep.
And that's what the baseline should be going into this year, because it's been 2 unacceptable years in a row, and it's time for that to stop. So I know you got to get back to hosting other things. You're hosting game shows today, right? Is it game shows?
Hosting, yeah, basically it's like HQ trivia, sort of vibes, but for companies.
Nice.
It's very cool. So if anyone listening would like to host a virtual game show for your company, just make sure to hit me up, and I'll talk to the good folks here at Luna Park.
Love it. Hit up Adam Abawala. I'm going to be in Chicago briefly, by the way.
Nice.
It's December 27th. I'm doing a show at the Lincoln Lodge if anyone wants to swing by and say
I've never
hello.
done that room all this time.
It's great. Yeah, the new Lincoln Lodge is great. Go there even when I'm not there. If you're in Chicago, it's great. I'm in Tulsa the rest of this week. I'm in upstate New York next weekend. I'm a bunch of places over the next couple of months.
And you and I are both in New York, December 20th, when I headline Stand Up New York, and Kevin's going to do a spot on the show. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, if you're in New York, absolutely Stand Up New York for Adam's show that I will also be dropping in on December 20th. And, we might be back quicker than usual with the podcast since things seem to be happening in Cubland. But for now, welcome, Jameson, Taillon. Welcome, Cody, Bellinger. And goodbye for now, Willson Contreras. We're sorry about that.
And final note, a congratulations to our good friend Pat Hughes,
yes,
who is going to the Hall of Fame. It could not be any better deserved by anyone. You and I have both received and paid for cameos from him. He is as wonderful a guy as we would all wish him to be. And that in the midst of an otherwise very depressing Cubs day yesterday with Contreras signing with the Cardinals, that was a truly wonderful piece of information.
Totally. The Ford Frick winner for this year, Pat Hughes. Legit Hall of Famer, awesome to see. So congrats, Pat, and we'll be back. We'll be back to talk about any other breaking Cubs news. And it's been a good winter meetings. It's been exciting, at least. So maybe more stuff soon. Thanks, everybody.
It has. We'll see you next week. I won't be in a cave, I promise.
Yeah, back in home.